Has Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 reduced you to a bittersweet ball of sadness and joy? Do you wish someone would quit slicing that onion? Well, here are some things that you might have missed while drying your eyes. Spoilers ahead, this one's for Teefs.
Now, I'm sure you're all aware of the extremely grave potential for cultural shock.
More than any movie in the entire MCU canon, the Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy could really be looked at as one giant music video to the greatest collection of songs K-Tel never released. Volume 3 opens essentially on a Guardians-themed video set to an acoustic version of Radiohead's Creep, which means that I'll be imagining that song being sung by a raccoon for the foreseeable future. Part of this is down to James Gunn's sense of how to use music, but it has a narrative component in the music that Quill's mother left him that remained his last tie to her and his home on Earth. The song that started it all and set the tone for the series was Come and Get Your Love. With that seemingly innocuous beginning, the stage had been set for Marvel's Space Misfits to become breakaway hits. After a brief discussion of favorite songs, the new captain of the Guardians keeps the tradition alive, polling the new members on their favorite songs, with Rocket bringing it back to the beginning with a little midnight special and Come and Get Your Love. There's always a tug-of-war when adapting comic books to live action, with the concerns that some of the larger-than-life aspects of comics just won't translate into live action. Outrageous costumes with eye wings or whatever Hawkeye and Wolverine have going on, or the daisy crown of Electro's original costume that are kinda hard to translate. And then there's the self-consciousness of people having superhero names.
Oh, you're using your made-up names. I'm Spider-Man then.
Before, that meant that costumes and special names were only alluded to. Dolph Lundgren's Punisher only put the skull on the handle of his daggers, and the Punisher's costume can essentially just be a t-shirt. Guardians Volume 3 not only brought out the team's official uniforms after Quill moved on from his Ravager duds, but it also gave us some full names. Drax sheepishly gives not only his name but his title, introducing himself as Drax the Destroyer. After being called pretty much every mammal between 10 and 30 pounds over the course of the series, Rocket learned that he was, in fact, a raccoon and took on his full comic book moniker. Will Adam finally put Adam and Warlock together? We'll have to wait for the next chapter of their lives to know for sure. Speaking of names, the Guardians tend to go through a lot of ships. Their insurance rate must be as high as someone who lives in downtown New York with only street parking. The adventures of the ragtag band of Space Misfits started out in the Milano, named after a proper 80s kid crush, Alyssa Milano. When that was used as a battering ram, they moved on to the Benatar, named after 80s rocker Pat Benatar, who sang Love is a Battlefield, sort of a perfect name for a ship where Quill and Gamora form their doomed relationship. Guardians Volume 3 introduces us to the newest, bigger, and badder ship, christened the Bowie, of course named after the Starman singer, David Bowie. Let's keep the name game rolling for one more go. In the MCU, of course, Quill finds out that he's half celestial, kind of, when Ego the Living Planet does a little family reunion. In the comics, things are a little different. Ego isn't a celestial, and instead more of an elder of the universe, and let me just check the test results. Ego is not the father. That honor goes to Jay's son, the hereditary leader of the Spartax people, who do not like pronouncing the A in people's names. Jason had been called back home to fight a war with the Bedoons when he stopped in on Earth and made a love connection with Meredith Quill. Jason was no less a bad guy than Ego, but in the MCU, Jason gets a try. In a nod to the comic book parentage, Quill's well-aged grandfather is named Jason, with a proper A instead of an apostrophe. The music of the first Guardians was meant to reflect the mixtape that Quill's mom gave him before she died, and became his most prized possession, enough for him to take huge risks to keep it. That's what made it so tragic when Ego crushed his precious Walkman and the tape inside. At the end of Volume 2, the galaxy's best-intentioned scoundrel Kraglin slid Peter a fancy new device someone had brought back from Terra, a Zune. Microsoft's ill-fated iPod Challenger again takes center stage as it's become a bit of a comfort device for Rocket. Guardians of the Galaxy has managed to collect the best menagerie of supporting characters in the MCU. If you missed the Christmas special, then you missed the introduction of a pair of characters that figured heavily in Volume 3. Cosmo the Spacedog, a Soviet-era dog sent into space like Lylla, who was hit with those superpower-granting cosmic rays, similar to the Richards family, made a proper appearance briefly in the Christmas special before entering her quest to get Kraglin to take back calling her a bad dog. Also returning is the musician and sensitive soul. Give me a second here. I need to limber up the old tongue for this one. I'm not gonna even try. Editor just showed on screen. Probably just hey man to his friends. During a game of cards, we also saw the return of the Broker from Volume 1. And once again, we get our regular cameo by Space's nastiest waterfowl, Howard the Duck. Just when I thought the first 10 minutes of Thor Love and Thunder was the saddest thing I'd ever seen in a comedic MCU movie, Volume 3 gave us the story of Rocket, Teefs, Floor, and Lylla. Just give me a minute. I'm good. It's fine. Whew, okay. While Lylla's time was short-lived, Rocket obviously never forgot, and had to have mentioned it to someone at some point, because all the way back in Volume 1 during his arrest, Lylla appears as one of his known associates, which just makes it sad all over again. For a character that only speaks 3 words, Groot has sure made quite an impact.
I am Groot!
The first Groot sacrificed himself to save his friends, paving the way for Baby Groot. And as The Mandalorian has proved, baby versions of prominent characters are absolutely adorable and make a ton of money. Groot has grown into his own in Volume 3, but it was in the first after-credits scene that he got an even bigger nod. Groot's original appearance in the comics was as the conquering monster from Planet X, a more articulate and evil-oriented Groot. That would inspire an alternate reality Groot who never met the Guardians and instead followed the conquering ways to become King Groot in the Contest of Champions, which resembles Groot's new big boy look. While Star Wars gave rebirth to space adventure in the way that we portray it, there was another special effects pioneer set in space just a few years earlier that also set the bar for science fiction and special effects. I'm of course referring to Arthur C. Clarke and Stanley Kubrick's 2001 A Space Odyssey. There's not one, but 2 nods to that science fiction classic. When the High Evolutionary is testing his new favorite experiment Phyla, she's running on the inside of a big ring. This mimics the special effects set piece of Dave using the spinning platform of Discovery 1 as a treadmill to keep in shape. When the Guardians suit up for a spacewalk, they resemble a flying circus of colors, which of course lends itself to some awkward confusion regarding what button calls up what suit. This is also a nod to 2001, that had different colored spacesuits so the Discovery 1's crew knew their suit quickly in an emergency. There was yet another nod to the Christmas special tucked away in the post-credits scene where Earthbound Star-Lord discusses work ethics with his grandfather while reading the paper. The headlines of that paper refer to the antics of the Christmas special, specifically about how Drax and Mantis kidnapped Kevin Bacon to give Quill for Christmas.
You can't just kill people!
Well, how am I supposed to know the rules if no one tells me?
Up until his passing, the man responsible for shepherding the Marvel Universe into existence, Stan Lee, would make a cameo of some kind in pretty much every movie. Since then, movies have slid in sly references to Stan the Man where they could. But for Volume 3, Stan made the nostalgic photo album that accompanied the credits in perhaps the greatest cameo ever. Once again, playing on the fan theory that Stan Lee was in fact none other than Uatu the Watcher, Stan was explaining all the cameos' lives he's had to the Watchers themselves. Sure, it might be a repeat of a cameo, but it's still pretty great. We miss you, Stan. Alien Worlds have led to the rise of the stealth cameo. A big star can appear for moments in a scene and the audience may not even know. Daniel Craig is the Stormtrooper in Force Awakens. Miley Cyrus is the voice of Mainframe in Guardians Volume 2. Tara Strong actually took over Mainframe's vocalization in Volume 3. And Pete Davidson joined the stealth casting. He really is everywhere. Davidson appears as the voice of Flecktick. If you don't recognize that name, it's because no one said it aloud. Flecktick is the blob-like experiment that startled Mantis during the rescue of all the children. Speaking of kids, did one of those rescued kids end up with the new Guardians of the Galaxy? What was Phyla doing there? Well, if she's anything like her namesake in the comics, she's holding it down. Phyla, or Phyla-Vell, is the 4th person to hold the title of Captain Marvel. She got that way by being the result of genetic experimentation using the DNA of Mar-Vell and a Titan named Elesis. The other Titan you might know was Thanos. In addition to the High Evolutionary, we were introduced to the High Evolutionary's test kitchen, Counter-Earth. For the movie, the first batch involved uplifting Earth's animals into human animals, inspired by H.G. Wells' Island of Dr. Moreau. In the comics, Counter-Earth is similarly an attempt to get it right, but he places it close to home. Like in the movie, he's prone to hitting the reset button, and even used Adam Warlock as its champion when he realized he had created a world with no superheroes. Wait, we don't have any superheroes. Are we Counter-Earth? He also name drops 2 species deep in the Marvel catalog. The Zeronians have nothing to do with the High Evolutionary in the comics, but they do have some evolution going on. A peaceful race facing invasion, their king exposed himself to modified solar rays to become the space parasite. The other is the Animan, who are creations of the High Evolutionary and operate essentially as henchmen. Maybe the most bittersweet reveal came when Quill quickly summed up the nature of his relationship with Gamora that included a dark moment of the soul, when he mentioned that he almost killed half the universe when he lost control. This of course refers to the moment when the Guardians, with the help of Iron Man, Spider-Man, and Doctor Strange, almost had the gauntlet off of Thanos before Quill started punching him awake to tell him what happened to Gamora, which led to fans widely blaming Peter for Thanos' victory. But in Endgame we got to see what he could do without the gauntlet, so maybe that wasn't going to be the victory that we all thought it was going to be anyways. If Mantis keeps pulling the same trick every time Drax and her are teamed up, that means that the galaxy is full of people who are desperately in love with Drax. That's only going to get worse if they find him now in his full Papa mode.
Anyways, happy trails.